Hey everyone, welcome back. So, have you ever tried growing rosemary? It's got that reputation for being like super easy.
Oh, yeah. Plant it and forget it, right?
Exactly. But we're diving into a blog post today from kianmeng.org, and it's by Yang, and they're sharing their rosemary journey. And, well, let's just say it might be a little more complicated than that.
Hmm. Interesting. So are we debunking the rosemary myth today?
Maybe? I mean, this is actually Yang's third try with rosemary, so they've definitely got some experience to share.
Third try. Wow. Okay, so this is for real.
Yeah, right. So we're hoping to learn from their trials and tribulations so we can all, have thriving rosemary. Um, and one thing that really jumped out at me right away is that Ang was kind of surprised at how much attention rosemary actually needs.
Yeah, I mean it does have this reputation, like we said, of being low maintenance, but especially if you're growing it in a container.
Which, let's face it, a lot of us are, right? Like, I've got limited space.
Exactly. And in containers, well, those conditions can be a little more, let's say, intense for plants. Overwatering, underwatering, like temperature changes even.
It all matters more when it's in a pot, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Less room for error.
So I'm thinking about that as Ang describes their rosemary's browning stems.
Uh-oh. Browning stems.
Yeah.
Not a good sign usually.
Right. They're suspecting root rot. And, that made me think, well, how do you usually go about diagnosing, like, a plant problem? Like, the signs? What are you looking for?
Oh, yeah. You got to become a plant detective.
Hmm.
Browning stems, yeah, that's a red flag, especially if it's starting from the base, working its way up. Often that means root rot, but you don't have to just, guess right.
So what do you do?
Take a look. Gently, take the plant out of its pot. Look at those roots.
Oh, right, a root inspection.
Exactly. Healthy roots should be firm, and a nice light color. But if they're mushy and dark,
That's the root rot.
ingo.
Yeah,
So, yeah, root inspection.
makes sense. Now, Ang decided to try propagating new rosemary plants from cuttings because of all this, the root rot. And it's interesting, they chose vermiculite and rooting powder specifically.
Ah, vermiculite. Yeah. That's a really good choice for propagation, especially I'd say for people who are just starting out.
Really? Why is that?
Well, it holds moisture really well, but it's also got good airflow and it helps that rooting hormone spread out evenly too. So it just creates a really good environment for those new fragile little roots.
So it's like a little, like, root spa.
Yeah, exactly. A little cozy, safe space for those roots to get going.
Okay, so are there ever times when you wouldn't use vermiculite for propagation? Or is it pretty much like a universal win?
Oh, standard potting mix can work well too, especially if you've got more experience and kind of have a better feel for like how much to water.
Right, right.
The main thing is you don't want things to get too soggy, especially with cuttings, It can lead to, well, right back to that root rot.
Oh, for sure. So yeah, each medium has its own, like, quirks to be aware of.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about learning the pros and cons.
And speaking of learning, Ang mentioned that older rosemary plants had a harder time recovering from, like, a big pruning. And that got me wondering, is there, like, a point where it's better to just replace a plant, versus trying to revive it?
Hmm. You're right. It does make you think about a plant's, its life cycle, right?
Yeah, like, do they age like us?
In a way, they do. As they get older, their energy, how they grow, it changes. So an older rosemary might struggle to come back from a hard prune because it's putting more energy into maintaining what's already there.
Okay, so, like, less energy for new growth.
Yeah, got it.
Exactly.
So instead of pushing it, maybe a fresh start is better.
Sometimes, yeah. And, it's interesting. Ang mentions that their rosemary is now kind of a side exploration project.
Yeah, I saw that. I think there's something to be said for adjusting our expectations in the garden, right?
Absolutely. Not every plant has to be, the star of the show. For sure. Like, it's okay to have some plants that are just for fun, for experimentation.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
But, before we get too deep into that, I am curious about Eng's propagation experiment.
Me too.
Yeah.
Especially because they mentioned comparing those rosemary cuttings, the ones of vermiculite versus the ones in regular potting mix.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
A side-by-side comparison.
and I think they're sharing the results in their next post.
I can't wait to see which one, comes out on top.
Okay, so we're all waiting to see those results from Ang. But before we get to that, I did have a question about something they mentioned. They actually removed the hardened base of their rosemary cuttings before they planted them.
Oh, yeah, I caught that too. It's a good tip.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. See, removing that tough part at the bottom, it helps the cutting absorb water better. So those new roots, they have a better chance.
Huh. It's funny how those little things can make a difference.
Totally. And Aang, they seem to be like a vermiculite convert now, at least for propagation.
Yeah, yeah. So what is it about vermiculite that makes it so good for this, for starting new plants?
Okay, so vermiculite is really cool, right? It's this natural mineral, and when you heat it up, it expands. So it gets all these tiny air pockets.
Oh,
And those pockets, they're crucial for roots to grow, right? Like it's light, it's airy, it's perfect for them to spread out and get the oxygen they need.
so like breathing room for roots.
Exactly. And another plus is it's sterile. So you're less likely to get any, nasty bacteria or fungi in there with your cuttings.
That makes sense. So it's like a safe, supportive environment for those new roots.
Exactly. It's giving them like the best possible start.
Okay, so for someone who's used to using regular potting mix, are there any adjustments they need to make when they're working with vermiculite?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that vermiculite, it tends to dry out faster than potting mix.
Oh,
So you got to be a bit more, on top of things, check it more often. And when that top inch feels dry, it's time to water.
so it's a little bit more hands-on.
A little bit, yeah. But for delicate cuttings, it's often worth it.
Right, right. Finding that balance.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I remember Ang mentioning that older rosemary plants can have trouble recovering from a hard prune.
Mm.
And I'm just curious, why is that? Like, wouldn't pruning encourage new growth?
You'd think so, right. But it
Yeah.
really comes down to how plants use their energy as they get older.
Okay.
Like a young rosemary, it's all about that growth spurt. It bounces back easy, but as it matures, it starts putting more energy into like maintaining its existing structure.
Yeah. So it's less about growing outwards and more about just like keeping up with what's already there.
Right, yeah.
So how can you tell when a rosemary plant is like making that shift? From growth mode to maintenance mode.
Well, you'll start to see more woody stems, and the growth overall, it might slow down. Not as vigorous.
Okay, less of those like crazy new shoots.
Exactly. And it might even start looking a bit, well, leggy, even after you prune it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, those are all signs that your rosemary is, entering a new phase of life.
Like it's maturing.
Exactly. And let's say you've got an older rosemary that's, seen better days.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you know when it's, time to call it quits and start fresh with those cuttings?
Right. Is there a point of no return?
Well, if you've done everything right, light, water, fertilizer, and it's still declining, that's a big sign.
Okay.
Or if there's like constant disease or pests you just can't get rid of, that's another one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And sometimes, honestly, you just got to trust your gut. Like if the plant just looks weak no matter what you do.
Like it's lost its oomph.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's lost its oomph. Then maybe it's time for a fresh start.
So it's about recognizing when a plant's like truly struggling and
And sometimes letting go is the kindest thing.
yeah, and putting your energy into, plants that have more of a fighting chance.
Exactly.
And that kind of ties back to Aang's decision to make their rosemary more of an experiment, right?
Yeah.
Like a side exploration project.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes it's about shifting your perspective.
Not everything has to be perfect.
Right. And it's okay to find joy in the process.
I love that. It makes me think about how we often have these must-have plants, right?
Mm,
But then there are those that are more like experiments.
totally. I think that's a natural way to think about it.
Like you have your favorites, the ones you'll do anything for, and then there are the ones you're just
Yeah.
curious about.
Yeah,
You're willing to take a chance.
exactly. And who knows, sometimes those experiments, they turn into new favorites.
You never know. But okay, before we get too sidetracked by our own plant obsessions, let's get back to Aang's blog post. They mentioned doing a visual comparison of their rosemary cuttings, right?
Yes, the vermiculite versus the potting mix.
Side by side.
Yeah. I'm so curious to see what they found.
Me too. And what conclusions they draw from it,
Like, will vermiculite still reign supreme?
Or will potting mix have its moment?
We'll have to find out.
I'm definitely checking out their next post.
Yeah.
But before we finish up this part, are there any other propagation methods or mediums that you find, particularly interesting or effective?
Oh, there are so many cool techniques out there. One that's becoming really popular is water propagation.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so you just, you literally just stick the cuttings in water and let them root.
Wow.
Yeah, and then once they've got roots, you can pop them into soil.
So you can, like, actually see those roots developing.
It's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
and it works really well for certain plants.
That's so cool. It's like having like a front row seat to the whole process. And it makes me think about what we were saying about those little details like Aang removing the hardened base of the cuttings.
Oh, yeah.
It's all those subtle things, right? That
Yeah.
can make such a difference.
It really is. Gardening is all about paying attention to the details, to the plant's needs.
Being present.
Yeah. It's a practice in patience and observation.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of moving on, I think it's time for us to transition to the last part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground with Aang's rosemary journey, from propagation to the challenges of those older plants. But there's one more aspect I want to explore before we wrap things up. So thinking back on Aang's their whole rosemary journey, what really strikes me is like how they've just rolled with it, like the good and the bad. The first two rosemary plants, well, those didn't work out, but they just, kept going.
Yeah, it's really inspiring, Aang's attitude, not giving up, trying new
And,
things.
and even now, like, they're calling it a side exploration project, but they're still so into it. Like, they really want to figure out this rosemary thing.
Yeah. It shows you that gardening doesn't have to be about, everything being perfect.
Right.
It can be about, the journey, experimenting, learning, and finding joy, even when things don't go, exactly how you planned.
I love that. It makes me think about how we put so much pressure on ourselves
Yeah.
sometimes, like to have these picture perfect gardens.
Yeah, we build these expectations up in our minds, right? Like everything's gonna be lush and we're gonna have all these harvests, but well, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way.
And it's okay to be bummed about it.
Yeah, totally. It's okay to feel disappointed. I mean, gardening can be pretty emotional. You put your heart into it. So yeah, if a plant's not doing well, you're gonna feel that. But I try to like shift my thinking, instead of just being sad about it, think about what I can learn. Like, did I do something wrong? Could I have changed something?
Yeah, so it's like turning those failures into, well,
Absolutely.
into feedback. Right.
Exactly. Feedback, not failure.
I like that. Now, speaking of feedback, Aang mentioned something in their post that I thought was interesting.
Mhm.
Like knowing when to just let go, when a plant's just not thriving no matter what.
It's tough, right?
Yeah, it is.
But sometimes it's the right thing to do. Like if you've tried everything and it's still not happy.
How do you know when it's time? Like, are there any clear signs?
Well, if you've got the basics covered, like the light, the watering, the fertilizer, and the plant's still going downhill, that's a big one.
Right, right.
Or if you see signs of like disease or pests and you just can't get rid of them no matter what you try.
That's another red flag.
Yeah. And honestly, sometimes you just have to like look at the plant and you can tell like if it's weak, wilted,
Yep.
just, doesn't have that vibrancy.
Like it's lost its sparkle.
Yes. Like it's lost its sparkle. That's when, maybe it's time to let it go and focus on the plants that are, really thriving. Yeah.
Focus on the ones that are full of life. Okay, before we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to think about Aang's rosemary journey one last time. What really stood out to you?
I think what impressed me most was just how willing they were to experiment and to adapt. They didn't give up on rosemary even though those first tries, well, they weren't successful. They kept learning. They tried new techniques and they changed their expectations, and now even though it's, a side exploration for them, you can tell they're still so curious about it.
And that's what makes gardening so much fun, right? It's that curiosity, that willingness to try things out. And that's what we hope you, our listeners, are taking away from this deep dive. That feeling of curiosity, that willingness to experiment in your own gardens, and to remember that even the challenges, they're all part of the process. So keep observing your plants, keep trying new things, and most importantly, keep finding joy in growing things. Thanks for joining us today.